we cannot really wait when it comes to stroke care. We have to deliver the appropriate care at the right time. But if we fail in that, the consequences obviously are catastrophic. We always say, right, what do we say? Time is brain.
Yep, that's what we say.
And so you have to make the right decision and send the patients to the right place. So how on earth do we do that, I guess, is the question. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Brain Buzz, year-end episode of Brain Buzz. I'm your host, Dr. Kimon Bekelis.
And I'm your co-host, Jason Wallen.
And pretty much this is another year for Brain Buzz. I think our second year, correct?
Yeah. And we have a brand new, shiny new studio that we were able to use this time.
Yeah, and I think we started using it kind of middle of the way this year. It allowed us to be a little bit more flexible with what we do, but also it was a big learning curve for us for a lot of things. Doing our own AV, so to speak, was not always easy, although we had substantial help building the studio, kind of running it presents its own set of challenges. But, this podcast today is more for us to kind of reminisce and recap what happened in the last year and to talk about this guy. I don't know if you want to show this guy here. Our guest, who's nobody today.
No. I'm looking at you like, what are you doing?
But yeah, so our podcast is always about our guest, right? And today we don't have anybody here, but we're going to talk about all the phenomenal guests that we have that we've had in 2024.
Yeah, no, we had a big year with a lot of guests. We learned a lot this year. I mean, at least I did from my standpoint. I'm sure you did more teaching than learning, but
nah, it was all learning for me. It's always learning, no matter what I do. And I think we started the year strong with our partners here at Good Samaritan University Hospital, Dr. Marisfoy and Dr. Missios. I think they were both phenomenal. Kind of supported the podcast at the beginning. So tell us a little bit about what a tumor or a brain tumor is.
So a tumor in the brain is just like a tumor elsewhere in the body. It's a tumor. It implies a problem with cell division. Your body's made up of billions of cells.
Right.
Thousands of them die every day. They get replaced by new ones. If there's an error in this process, the cell may die and get replaced by 100 or 1,000 cells instead of just one.
Right.
And over time, that forms a lump. It forms a tumor. So when this process happens in the brain, you get a brain tumor, or it can happen elsewhere in the body, and then pieces can break off and go to the brain, and that can form a brain tumor as well.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, there's generally two types of brain tumors that are inherent to the brain. They start in the brain, and tumors that come from another part of the body and then end up in the brain, and that we call metastasis, right?
Right, and that's the big classification is there are tumors that start in the brain from the brain.
Right.
And there are tumors that start elsewhere in the body and they travel to the brain.
Got it. And how does this difference in where the tumor is coming from, how does that affect management?
It affects greatly because there are similarities in management, but there's also great differences. So a tumor that starts in the brain, from the brain, the next sort of big brains point is whether the tumor is benign or malignant,
right?
Or not something more aggressive.
Tell us a little bit about that. So if a tumor is coming from the brain, what's the scale in terms of aggressiveness of that tumor?
Yeah, we call that grading.
Okay.
The different grades of a tumor is a scale of how aggressive they are.
Sure.
And the MRI imaging, head CT or an MRI can give you an idea what you're dealing with.
Okay.
But the only way to know for sure is to look at the tumor or a piece of the tumor under the microscope, which implies a surgical procedure to remove at least part of it.
Sure.
And looking at it under the microscope, you can get an idea how aggressive the tumor is and assign a grade to it.
Gotcha.
And so far, up until a few years ago, that was the only way we could know how aggressive a tumor is.
Right.
Lately, like within the past 10, 15 years, As genetics has become more sophisticated, now that we can know the genetic fingerprint of the tumor that we're looking at, and that can give us another layer of information in terms of how aggressive it is. So we can see how many genetic abnormalities a tumor exhibits, and that can give us an idea in terms of how aggressive the tumor is.
Gotcha. That's fascinating.
They spoke about things that are very near and dear to their heart. Dr. Marisfo spoke about intracranial atherosclerosis. He's a big proponent of treating appropriate patients with this intervention. As a matter of fact, new evidence since his podcast have pushed for more treatment of intracranial atherosclerotic disease. So he's really a force of nature when it comes to that.
So besides having scheduled cases which can change day by day, the part of our practice that there is so much unpredictable things in it, being always flexible, making decisions on how to do things logistically. I'm not talking about doing a case. I'm not talking about technicality or surgical aspects. I'm talking about how do you get the patient in the room in time, how you're scheduling the other ones.
It's like balancing your life,
and
which is the topic of what we're
communicating with everyone, with the patient, with the family, with your staff, everyone.
Right, and an important aspect is, of course, not all emergencies happen during work hours, so you might be home, you might be doing something, a family function, and all of a sudden there's a call, you're on call, you have to go. And so how are you able to marry the two?
So I would say there are a couple of things. One is more geographic things, because you have to be here in 30 minutes. So you draw a line, how far can you get, and to be here in time, because you really don't want to waste time for a procedure which is time dependent, like stroke. You want to be here in time, or even earlier as possible. The other thing is more what you're scheduling in your day when you're home, but you know that you're on call. So probably it's not the best time to have a 50 people big party and you're hosting the whole thing. And by the way,
unless
guys,
you want to avoid it.
Yeah, you call me that. I have a case for it. So so you go more light, I would say. You do stuff which probably is more reading, very short-timed, actions at home, like studying with the kids or doing something or playing together, which it probably will end in 30 minutes, in an hour, and if you're cold, it's fine. You continue when you're back.
Right, exactly.
And the second one being Dr. Missio Simeon. He spoke about brain tumors. Brain tumors. He's a brain tumor expert and an endovascular neurosurgeon. He treats brain tumors both with open and endovascular techniques, and he spoke a little bit about all the new and exciting ways we have to treat brain tumors. And I think that was phenomenal.
That was a heavy episode.
It was a heavy episode.
If I remember, it was heavy.
It's a little, of course, bad prognosis. Things are a little heavier than our usual vascular stuff.
I mean, he handled it well.
Of course, he enjoys doing it. For us, in the neurovascular world, it's all exciting. There's of course a devastating deficit, but we strive to change it and get people better, and that's pretty much what this is. And so that was pretty cool. And then after our two Good Samaritan University Hospital partners, we had a very special guest. I'd say probably a world expert on stroke, Dr. Albers, who connected with us remotely from the Bay Area, from San Francisco, and really spectacular work. He was one of the few folks that to have envisioned this before it happened and materialized it and created clinical applications for it that we all use on a daily basis.
Yeah, and he was actually our first guest, be it remotely.
In this studio, yeah, in this studio for sure, and that was pretty cool. And
a little nerve-wracking doing the first one remotely, but
yeah, we managed. That was interesting. We had a lot of help for that one.
Yes, we did.
Much, yeah. I'm at Stanford. Sorry I couldn't be there live and in person.
It's our pleasure to have you with us. So we're going to talk a lot about exciting things today, and kind of talking a lot about the cutting edge of technology and innovation and research when it comes to stroke and the care of these patients that we all deal with on a daily basis. And maybe for our audience who might not be familiar with you, kind of the general audience, of course, all of us in neurointervention know who you are, but maybe for our general audience and our patients that are listening in, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you came to be who you are today.
Sure. I'm a stroke neurologist, and I've been at Stanford for a long, long time. Arrived in 1984 and did my training, including neurology residency and a stroke fellowship, and then started on the faculty in 89. In 92, we started a very unique center called the Stanford Stroke Center that brought together neurosurgery, neurology, interventional neuroradiology to work together to improve diagnosis and treatment of stroke. And we've been at this for more than 30 years now, and have had the opportunity to do a lot of research into trying to optimize stroke diagnosis and treatment.
Great. And for those of you guys who really don't know a lot of the details behind Dr. Albert's career, he is the person that really changed the way we deal with stroke when it comes to the time frames that we consider appropriate to treat stroke. Generally speaking, and of course, we've discussed this before in other episodes of our podcast, but generally speaking, we used to be able to offer stroke treatment to folks that show up to the emergency room within 3.5 to 4 hours of symptom onset. But after some clinical trials, we were able to extend that window up to 6 hours with more invasive treatments, what we call mechanical thrombectomy. And then Dr. Albers was the lead clinical investigator in a clinical trial called Diffuse 3. And of course, there was other clinical trials at the same time that allowed us to push that window to 24 hours. And that's really changed the field. And all of us in neurointervention are grateful for your work in that, and for kind of having the vision to push the boundaries when it comes to stroke care. How did you initially conceive the notion that stroke care can be extended so far out?
Yeah, it started in the mid-90s. One of the faculty members at Stanford, a guy named Mike Mosley, had done some work with different MR sequences and had stumbled onto the fact that diffusion-weighted imaging could see a stroke in real time. He was doing animal work with a cat stroke model. And this was incredibly exciting. It was just around the time we'd started the stroke program. And he asked us whether we thought this could be useful for patients, and said, hey, this could be the holy grail of really figuring out how strokes evolve. Because when I was in medical school, and similar to you, it sounds like I was taught that stroke was going to be very difficult to treat because all the brain damage happens so quickly.
Right.
So what we started to do was doing serial diffusion MR scans on patients. And what we saw is that these strokes were all different. Everybody's stroke evolved differently, but most strokes were growing for a long period of time, sometimes 24, 48, even some were growing for 3 days. So the idea we had was that if they're growing for a long period of time, that means they should be able to be treated for a longer period of time. And then we needed to work on some way to be able to determine when the patient came in, was the stroke still growing or was it done? And that's when we started using perfusion imaging and then developing the software called Rapid that allowed us to see the area that was dead versus the area that was at risk and was potentially salvageable.
Right, and I think that was that catapulted in a lot of developments with that software, and eventually, a lot of us are using Rapid, of course, and that allows us in real time to really assess the viability of the brain tissue and make decisions on treatment and incorporate our team into those decision-making moments.
Luckily.
And, then we spoke a little bit about how we built a comprehensive stroke center at Good Samaritan University Hospital. And that was nice to both remember how...
It was a walk down memory lane.
Yeah, how we came to today, and also a bit of a reminder of how to do it again, because now we're tasked to do that in St. Francis Hospital in Nassau County. And, as the Stroke and Brain Aneurysm Center of Long Island is expanding, both in Suffolk and Nassau County, as the dominant force to deliver care for stroke and brain aneurysms, That's key. And in that same context, we had two of our new partners from the NASA expansion talk to us about themselves and their vision to get these programs where they need to be. And those were Dr. Sandeep Mangala and Dr. Dan Calnan.
Yeah, two great individuals that we were honored to have here.
Yeah.
And now we're honored to work with.
For sure. As you guys know, we've been talking a lot about the Stroke and Brain Aneurysm Center of Long Island and all the great things that have been happening here in Suffolk County in neurointervention, treating strokes, brain aneurysms, diseases of the brain and the spine when it comes to the blood vessels. But we are expanding, and the expertise that's been created over time at Suffolk County, we're bringing it with some of the most talented people in the region and in the world to Nassau County. And part of that expansion, I'd say the first component of that is Dr. Sandeep Mangala. He's here with me today. Sandeep, welcome.
Thank you, Kimon. Thank you, Jason.
All right. So I'm sure you'll be on our podcast a lot more in the future and in some of our educational videos. But the main thing that you'll be doing, working with us, will be clinical care, right? Taking care of patients.
Yes, that's the primary mission.
The primary mission. So what do you do?
Well, for the last 20, 25 years, I've been, basically developing, clinical programs for stroke, ischemic and hemorrhagic stroke, and I specialize in endovascular treatment of these conditions.
Great. And so what Sandeep is really saying is that he can go into the brain with the smallest hole in your groin or your wrist and make it into the brain and change the outcome of a devastating disease, right? Brain aneurysm, strokes, everything that we've been talking about. And of course, he would treat stroke, brain aneurysms, arteriovenous malformations, moya disease, carotid disease, all the cool stuff that we do on a daily basis. And so, of course, you said over 20 years you've been doing this on Long Island, and I know
in New York City, yes.
And New York City, right. And you've set up a lot of programs beforehand. What's exciting for you in cerebrovascular or neurointervention? What drives you? What gets you up in the middle of the night, other than a phone call for a stroke?
Other than phone calls, yeah. I think there's two main things. So first of all, we as neurosurgeons, we always love looking at outcomes, right?
Right.
And neurosurgery, more than anything else I've done, we a lot of times can get that immediate gratification. So when we come in the middle of the night for a stroke, a lot of times the next day we can see that this patient who couldn't talk and couldn't move their right side is now saying thank you and shaking your hand. And there's for me, there's nothing in the world that makes all of the stuff that we put in
worth it.
Worth it. That interaction is just, it gives you that sense of I've done something with my life. I've helped humanity.
Right.
The other thing that really drives me is I think our field is advancing at light speed. I mean, we look to interventional cardiology as sort of, they started going down this pathway before us.
Right.
So and that's one of the reasons why where I work at St. Francis, it's a really exciting place because they are the heart center. And it's really exciting to be alongside people who are pushing the limits. But every day we have new things that we can do in the vascular. New stents, new coils, new devices. I mean, they're talking about shunts that we're going to be able to work with.
That's right.
Except for pediatric neurosurgery, almost every neurosurgeon hates shunts.
Right.
Because this could be the change that we've been looking for.
Yeah. And this is one of the most fascinating things for me. It's the potential of this field, right? Everything in the human body pretty much everything has blood vessels, right? You use blood vessels to get nutrients and pretty much everywhere across the body, and we have unique access to those blood vessels, and we know how to manipulate wires and catheters to get to the most remote parts of the brain without opening the head, right?
There is nothing that is more like a road system than the blood vessels, right? You have the big blood vessels that are the highways to different states, and then you have
little blood vessels that'll go to any little burrow you need to get into.
Right.
It's the same thing. It's like it's a tube system
Right.
that we can use. And I think people are really harnessing that more and more, especially in the brain, where you don't want to go through normal brain tissue.
Right.
And you can avoid doing that with this wonderful tube system that we have.
Absolutely. You know, one of our episodes, we had a patient couple, where it so happened that both husband and wife had brain aneurysms, which is a very rare thing to happen, and they had great outcome taken care of here by the Stroke and Brain Aneurysm Center. And they're grateful, they're philanthropic, and they're very supportive of all the efforts to promote awareness for brain aneurysms. And that was, I think, a really amazing episode.
That was definitely different. It was also the first time that we had two guests simultaneously.
Right.
So a lot of firsts this year.
Right.
As you say in a lot of your talks when we did
right, when we
Open Good
started
Sam.
8 years ago, right. And so also really important to remember, we also, one of our podcasts, we gave that spot to a day in the life episode. So we didn't have a guest necessarily. I guess we were the guest in that episode.
Yeah.
And it was the day in the life of a neurovascular neurosurgeon, where we discussed all the things that we do, and took a camera with us in since we wake up in the morning till the end of the day, from the operating room to the angio suite to the office, and all the other things we do. And I thought that was really cool to kind of share with folks, because sometimes, you know, the behind the scenes is not what people see, and maybe folks forget that physicians and neurosurgeons and stroke physicians and everybody else, that sometimes maybe they see as superhumans. They're really humans, and they are subject to the same laws and challenges that everybody else is. And you know, we do have a challenging job to do, but we like it a lot, and I think we do it well. We have a phenomenal team, world-class team in the entirety of Long Island, and couldn't be prouder of everybody.
No, we do have a top-notch crew. You know, coming from one of the busiest places, Thomas Jefferson, you know, you did your fellowship there. You saw, you know, you went from a very efficient place to somehow we made it more efficient place.
Right.
Because we're doing what they were doing in 3 rooms with 3 times the amount of staff.
Right.
All into one right now. And luckily, we're going to be expanding.
Yeah, I mean, luckily there's a as we speak, they're building a second biplane room and a third biplane room all at the same time to accommodate the very large volume of cases. The expansion of people that we're planning on, that has happened already, but even further, and all the things that are going on in Nassau County. And one last guest we also had to do with physical therapy. You know, we talk about stroke, we talk about what we do before patients get to the hospital and while they're in the hospital. But then when the patients leave the hospital, it's kind of a black box for a lot of clinicians. So we brought one of our physical therapy partners, and we chatted with them about what we can do or what happens in that area, and how we can get patients better from a therapy perspective.
Yeah, Gary, and we're lucky enough that he's very local for us.
Yeah,
and actually deals with a lot of patients. And he gave us a lot of great insights into like the mindset of, you know, when you hit roadblocks and how to overcome that, and how he does it personally with patients. So I thought that was very interesting. In your experience, are males or females better patients? And I'll tell you why, based upon what I've seen. That's an unfortunate question.
I have found, honestly, fairly equal. There's never, I don't recall any experiences that really kind of like shaped it one way or another. I have noticed that I've had much more male patients than female patients.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, we see in the support group a lot of times the men are either too hard on themselves.
Yeah.
Because they were the caregivers for so long for the family. They're the breadwinner, or, you know,
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they have a hard time now either being taken care of or coming to terms with, like you had said earlier, it's almost like the new normal.
Well, that's the thing. Like a lot of times, especially in older generation, I'm sure, like, you know, obviously in this field, like it's skewed toward the older side. They have a more, you know, like let's call it a classic kind of view on things, where like, I'm the man, I'm supposed to be strong, I'm supposed to be providing, I'm supposed to do all this. they're supposed to be like the foundation, or they're supposed to be the bedrock, and now they're not. So they have this, they've associated their value, especially if they're done working, if they're retired, with that level of independence, with the fact that, you know, I could do whatever I want now. And now if that gets taken away from them, it's very hard for them to come to terms with that.
Yeah. And with the younger ones, I've seen that because they are still the breadwinner or the main income, now it's a financial aspect that is compounding.
Yeah, yeah. I could, you know, very easily see that because, you know, especially with young males, it's like when you're 18, you don't really have much yet.
Right.
You know.
You also think you're invincible.
Exactly. Exactly. All of a sudden you go from what is supposed to be, you know, the prime of your life to now you're dependent on somebody else for a lot of stuff that you took completely as granted. Just, you know, and now it's not.
Yeah, yeah, so you know, like I said, great year. We're more looking into the future and trying to design, you know, identify our guests for the podcast in 2024, Brain Buzz in 2025, and you know, a lot of names come to mind. I think we will focus on impactful individuals from our community and beyond, and we'll bring over some patients. We'll bring over some folks with experiences, so we'll.
Well, speaking of one of our final guests of the year,
right, and I didn't mention it. See, I didn't mention it because while we're recording this has not aired, but it will be airing probably or definitely before this. Before this goes live, so I'm gonna let you present that one.
He's a professional boxer, Justin Big Time Biggs. So I'm very excited. It was a great, phenomenal interview. I felt at home because it wasn't as medical driven,
right.
But we were able to take, you know, from a sports perspective, especially a sport like boxing where it's, you know, you hear about the head trauma, and we were able to learn so much from somebody who does it, grew up with that, had family members that did that,
right,
and who's a great guy.
Right.
So that was very exciting for me, and I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic
episode.
It
was a great episode, and I hope you guys love it. But yeah, that was probably going to be our final podcast for the year.
What goes through your mind when you see your opponent laying there and you're standing over them and they're knocked out?
Well, me growing up, being a Christian household, I always pray. I always pray that for victory, and I pray that him and I come out the same way, right? That we go in there. When I'm in there, I want to hurt this person the worst they've ever been hurt, because fear is what allows me to be great. It's like Batman. Like if I can inflict fear on you when my name comes up, that's half the battle. You're not going to operate later on till you're like, oh man, he's not that tall. He's not that, you know, that many muscles. And then by that time, I'm 3 rounds up.
Yeah.
Right.
But when I hurt somebody, I want them to fall, not get up, and I want it to be dramatic as possible. I want like a knockout where they hit the ground, boom, unconscious, and it's a statement. Once I come to my senses.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm like,
once the blood loss is over.
I pray for them, and you know, we talk, and I'm happy that they're okay.
Yeah, you see that with most sports that are contact. You know, everybody talks crap before a fight, sucks each other up, and then after a fight, everybody hugs. Most of the time.
I see that. You meet different kind of people. Like, you meet people that really mean it. Like, if I'm telling someone, like, I'm going to knock you out, I'm going to hurt you worse than you, I mean it. Like, I'm that type of fighter. I'm not saying it to you because it sounds good. I'm not saying. Now, you have a lot of other fighters that don't really know. They don't really mean it. They just want to win. I want to knock you out.
Yeah.
I don't want to just win. If I leave the fight and I don't get a knockout or it's something dramatic, I'm like, whatever. Like, I live for that.
And so really exciting, really excited to see that come out. But yeah, that's kind of what we're planning the future. I think the next year is gonna be a lot more exciting. A lot of new things coming up. And of course, you know, we're always available for suggestions. We always want to hear from you guys, either with questions or guest suggestions, and we'll accommodate them. And of course, Don't forget to support us through liking our videos and subscribing to our channel. I guess we'll see you guys next year.
Thank you.